If you lived by a train track, this would be the way to soundproof your wall if you don't want to hear that train. A lot of people that has a recording studio inside their home or a home theater use these types of wall soundproofing techniques to basically make it so no noise bleeds out to the rest of the house. It's called a double wall system. Now, the double wall system is fantastic at isolating sound, but here's the catch. It can be a bit more expensive. You see, with this system, you're essentially building a room within a room. That means more material and more labor costs because you're framing a second wall alongside the first one. Another thing to consider is space. If your room is already on the smaller side, the double wall system might not be the best choice, because it adds about an inch of air gap between the new wall and the existing wall. Plus the thickness of the new wall itself, usually a 2x4, so you're losing several inches of space in your room compared to just using a resilient channel. Because what we're doing here, with building a room within a room, you want to have an air gap. That air gap is what is going to be isolating a lot of the noise. What you do, you add it onto the frame, onto the studs, and then you add your drywall. What it does, it creates a space between the studs and the drywall, and that air gap, all those metal channels will help to absorb a lot of the vibrational noise coming from room to room. And that's what the air gap does best, because if you have a double wall with that air gap, it helps to reduce all of the vibrational noise. And that's why I mentioned if you live by a train track, because as you would know, a train would have a lot of vibrational noise. You don't only hear it, but you feel it. And that's what that air gap will help reduce, that vibration. By building another wall and by basically soundproofing the first and second wall, you'll be well on your way to basically not hearing anything through the room or from outside if you have noisy neighbors or a train. Now, the first thing that you want to do before you even start building a second wall, you want to take care of this one. What you want to do is add some insulation. What I would recommend is acoustical insulation, something like Rockwool Safe and Sound. This video is not sponsored by them. But if you were to put insulation all throughout your house, I would probably just use the pink fiberglass insulation because it's a lot cheaper. But by adding acoustical insulation, you'll be reducing the noise by a couple more decibels, and it helps to absorb some of the noise compared to the pink insulation. So if you're just building one wall, you won't need that much, and the difference in cost shouldn't add too much on your budget. But as I said, if you're insulating the entire house, I would just stick with the pink insulation and just use your Rockwool Safe and Sound for the rooms that you want to soundproof. But before adding that insulation, here's a couple of things that a lot of people don't really talk about and that can stop a few more decibels from coming from room to room. Because if everything that you do in terms of soundproofing this wall is just to reduce 1, 2, 3 decibels each things, then it starts to matter, because if you get to 10 decibels, just 10 decibels, it's basically the equivalent of cutting the noise in half by what a human ear can hear. And all those decibels counts. One that really counts right behind me, as you can see, that big red glob. What I did here is I added a putty pad on the electrical box of an electrical outlet and also the light switches. There's a lot of holes in those electrical boxes, and you'll want to seal those holes because sound will travel through those holes. And by having the wall open, you can use a putty pad to block some of those holes and some of that noise to come through. Now, to do a double wall, yes, you have to remove the first layer of drywall. You have to get right to the stud. You can't build a double wall without doing that. And also, if you do build a double wall, you'll want to remove that because you want to get to the first layer of drywall so you can go ahead and add your putty pad, add your insulation, and also, you see these seams right there? All these seams? What you'll want to do here is use acoustical caulking. Now, acoustical caulking is like regular caulking. What it does is it doesn't dry up, it stays rubbery over time, and it doesn't crack. So basically, if you're going to close this wall in, you want to make sure that you want to have everything inside done properly, because if it cracks, then the noise will just begin to bleed where it shouldn't. After all that is complete, you'll want to add your first layer of insulation. Once that is done, it's time to build your second wall. You want to leave an inch gap between the studs and your second wall. And by using wood spacers, it makes it a little bit easier to keep that 1 inch all around the room. Next, you'll use something called IB3 clip. These clips are essential because they help reduce noise transfer from the outside wall to the inside wall. Now you want to attach this right onto the ceiling because it also helps it to not wobble and to not move after it's completed. When framing the new wall, basically frame it the exact same way that you would frame an old wall or the existing wall, or if you hire somebody, they'll know how to, or they should know how to build a double wall system. Now after you have the double wall completed, the important part is to add the proper type of drywall and to not add your typical 1/2 inch drywall, which is not that much cheaper than a 5/8 inch drywall. You don't really need to go into the soundproofing drywall, which the difference between 5/8 inch drywall and soundproofing drywall or noise dampening drywall is noise dampening drywall has 2 layers of chip rock and then a layer of some type of acoustical compound in between, and it helps reduce a little bit of the noise, but it costs a lot more money. And really, with what we'll be doing, adding just a layer of 5/8 inch drywall over top of your studs is the way to go. But before doing that, add some more acoustical compound onto the studs before adding your drywall. This will help dampen more noise that goes from wall into the middle into the next room. Now after your first layer of drywall is installed, grab your acoustical sealant and seal all the seams in between each layers of drywall to assure a proper seal between rooms. Before adding another layer of drywall, you'll want to add something in between, something called mass-loaded vinyl. Mass-loaded vinyl will help reduce noise going from one room to the other, and also it will help absorb a little bit of the vibration because of the way it's constructed. It's just rubbery and it's heavy. So that rubber will help absorb a little bit of the noise, not that much, but if you're going all the way and really wanting to soundproof the wall so you don't hear anything, then adding mass-loaded vinyl will help. Now it's time to add your second layer of drywall. If you're not sure exactly where the studs are because of all the different walls you have in there, just use a stud finder to make sure that you're actually attaching it right into the stud. After the second layer of drywall is installed, add some acoustical sealant around the electrical box where the box meets the drywall to seal that gap. And after all that is done, you should have a soundproof wall. Now if you're looking for a more DIY way to soundproof a room and something that might not cost this much, there is a way to do it. There is a way to soundproof a wall without even ripping out the drywall, without making it look like this. There are different techniques, and if you want to know more about doing that and on a budget, video right there will show you exactly how to do it and how to not break the bank, and something that you can do yourself. And thank you very much for watching. Until next time, assuming that you subscribed.